China is a vast and diverse country with a rich culture that has evolved over thousands of years. This can make it a culture shock for foreigners who are not familiar with Chinese customs and traditions. Here are some of the biggest cultural shocks that foreigners may experience in China. The language barrier. China has its own language, Mandarin Chinese, which is spoken by over 1 billion people worldwide. If you do not speak Mandarin, it can be difficult to communicate with locals and get around. There are some English speakers in China, but they are mostly concentrated in major cities, the crowded streets. China is one of the most populous countries in the world, and this is reflected in the crowded streets of its cities. It can be overwhelming for foreigners to be surrounded by so many people, and it can be difficult to get around. The lack of personal space. Chinese people are generally more comfortable with physical contact than people from Western cultures. This can be seen in the way they stand close together, talk loudly, and touch each other. Foreigners who are not used to this level of physical contact may feel uncomfortable. The staring. It is not uncommon for Chinese people to stare at foreigners. This is not necessarily a sign of disrespect, but it can be jarring for foreigners who are not used to it. The spitting. Spitting is a common sight in China, and it can be seen in public places. This is a cultural norm in China, but it can be off-putting for foreigners. The food. Chinese food is very different from food in many other countries. It can be spicy, oily, and unfamiliar to foreigners. There are also some foods that are considered taboo in Western cultures, such as dog meat and bat soup. The drinking culture. Chinese people are known for their love of drinking, and it is not uncommon for them to drink heavily. This can be a shock to foreigners who are not used to drinking so much. The censorship. China has a strict censorship regime that blocks many websites and social media platforms. This can be frustrating for foreigners who are used to being able to access information freely. The pace of life. China is a fast-paced country, and this can be a shock to foreigners who are used to a slower pace of life. The Chinese are always on the go, and they are always looking for ways to improve their lives. These are just some of the biggest cultural shocks that foreigners may experience in China. It is important to be aware of these cultural differences before you travel to China. Tips for dealing with culture shock. Be patient and understanding. It takes time to adjust to a new culture. Do your research. Learn about Chinese culture and customs before you travel. Be open-minded. Be willing to try new things and experience new cultures. Don't be afraid to ask for help. If you are struggling to adjust, don't be afraid to ask a Chinese friend or colleague for help. China is a fascinating country with a rich culture. By being aware of the cultural differences, you can make your trip to China more enjoyable and less stressful.